I'm Eve Young, a Jerusalem Post economics correspondent. I'm here today with Ronya Rubinstein, the CEO of EndoSpot. Ronya, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very happy to be here.
I would love if we could just start by you telling us about yourself.
I would first describe myself as a very curious person. I'm a lifelong learner. And this has been part of my life, my whole life. And I am on a mission to make things better. Specifically today, and that's the center of our conversation, is about making things better for women's health in general and specifically endometriosis patients.
I'm really excited for us to get much deeper into that. I've been fascinated by endometriosis since I think I read a book that we talked about earlier, and we'll get way into that. But first, I'd love to hear more about you, where you're from, maybe your professional journey. Because today we'll get into this, but you're the CEO of a startup, and I'd love for us to learn how you got there.
So I don't have a normal pathway in my life. I'm Israeli, born in Israel. But when I was 11 years old, we moved to Kenya.
Wow.
My father was working for the Israeli government at the time. So we were in Kenya, and then we were in South Africa. I studied even 1 year in the university in South Africa.
Wow.
The first time that I registered to go to university, I was going to learn math and physics. But after I decided not to do that and go to the army, I went to law school. And throughout law school, I wasn't really sure what I was doing in law school. I come from a family, my mother is a historian, and my father is an engineer.
Oh, wow.
No one did anything around law in my house. I could see other people that did law before, like I come from, they understood what was going on. For me, it was everything was really, really new. And I thought that this was a tool for me to learn to make a difference in society.
Nice.
So I was busy with rights, equal rights for people with disabilities at the time. That was really interesting for me. And I learned a lot of things around that, not only about law, but around living with disability and the different aspects of it. And it was really something very important for me at the time. As I started working in my career, I focused more on law and found my way into intellectual property law. Again, in intellectual property, I like the fact that it's combined with domain knowledge. That's not only law on the one hand. I told you I'm a lifelong learner. I like to learn on the one hand, but also intellectual property is also a tool that affects society. It affects the economic activity, but it also affects who participates in what.
Interesting.
Right? It has a lot of. It is a tool. Okay. When I started, I was again. I'm today very deeply in working in the health. That's my passion. But when I started working on intellectual property, I was looking at open source code.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and it was 1994.
Wow.
Early time, it was the idea of open source. What does it serve to do? What's the activity of open source? How does it correlate with intellectual property? Because it was like, no, we want everything to be open. So is there intellectual property? What is? Yes, there is. Very important. And intellectual property is also an important tool to propagate open access.
Wow.
And open access and open code is important to the ability to to participate in society, to participate in social activities, in economic activities, right? So everything was connected to this passion, right? And by accident, completely by accident, I found myself in Rambam Hospital after a few years. They were looking for someone for intellectual property, and I wanted something that will be interesting, new, and that I could do a PhD in intellectual property. So I thought it would work out. The PhD didn't work out. But working for Rambam was an amazing period for me. Because I didn't know anything about new technologies in healthcare before. I didn't know what clinical trials were. I didn't know what the challenges of developing a new health technology were. And I'm talking about health technologies, but it's a huge spectrum of technologies that one is not like the other, but they're all necessary for healthcare. And I love it completely. I fell in love with this area. I said, okay, I've got relevant knowledge, and I have the knowledge to learn. Right? I think a power tool of the power, of attorneys, is that we are not afraid of paper. We are not
I
afraid of
bet.
reading.
I've heard there's a lot of reading involved. I heard there's a
Not
ton
afraid.
to read.
So everything that had to do with regulation, everything that had to do with, and there's a lot of regulation around healthcare, easy to learn, ethics, and learning the different problems around it. New health technologies require understanding in many, many fields. Okay, because it's the regulation and the business, right? If nobody would buy it, right, then why did we do it for?
Yeah.
Right? So we need to understand the business and why the health systems would adopt it. And each health system is different around the world completely. So there's a lot of questions to ask in terms of what the physicians want, what the people who pay for technologies want, what do patients want. So there are a lot of questions around that. And how does everything else go into it? How do we integrate the different questions, regulatory, reimbursement, an actual need? What people may be able to accept. Okay, some people things are not acceptable. We'll talk about endometriosis and the reality around it, which is not acceptable. Intellectual property, and how does it come into it? Different financial incentives. So there are a lot of questions around it, and ethics. Ethics are really, really important in developing a new health technology because trust in the health system
Yeah.
it's not just nice to have, it's major.
It's absolutely
right?
necessary.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely, and we've seen it around COVID, right? There were so much
Yeah.
questions that came out because people didn't say, can I trust this? Can I not
Or
trust this?
populations that we know have lower trust in institutions not getting treatment, not even being willing to try to get treated. Like what you're saying is so exactly true. Like it's absolutely necessary to have trust in healthcare providers or they simply won't, patients won't go to them.
So I said I was doing clinical trials. And when I was researching around clinical trials, I found one of the problems in clinical trials is representation.
Yeah.
Okay, who participates in the clinical trials? Now, why is it important? Okay, it's not just because we want different participation. Okay, we want in general, right? But because if a certain population was not included in the clinical trials, we don't have enough information about this population. And if we don't have enough information about this population, we don't know how to treat them properly.
There's I think there's this famous kind of almost double standard or this ironic fact where women, because they have menstrual cycles, weren't included in clinical trials. But then we don't know how menstrual cycles impact drug efficacy because women on menstrual cycles weren't included in these clinical trials.
True, true. So there was, it started by meeting well, okay? There was a big thalidomide trial. Women were getting a drug for pregnancy, nausea, right? And the babies came out without hands and legs and
Wow.
okay. And then they said, okay, there's a big problem with clinical trials in women's. Let's take all women out. And then they sort of said maybe this was going overboard with this because we do need data about women, but only in 1993 it was mandatory to have women in clinical trials. And even today, how do we analyze women's data? Okay, I'm 53. Okay, we're going through menopause. Is the data, if we analyze women 40 to 50, would it be the same way that we analyze it if we analyze 40 to 55, 45 to 50, 50 to 55? Would it be the same or not? Okay.
Complicated.
So not necessarily. I know that it does. I know that it's not. Okay. And the question is, what is correct? How to analyze women's data so we know how to treat women who are 54?
Yeah.
It's a question, even if we are in the clinical trials.
Are these all thoughts that you're having in this job at Rambam? You're at the hospital, you're seeing all these trials, but you're an intellectual property lawyer. Where is this meeting you and how does that take you forward? Because now we know the ending. Spoiler, you're the CEO of a health startup for women. But how do we get from intellectual property to there?
So I started with intellectual property. But very soon after I started intellectual property, clinical trials came in, which is a different topic, but I started learning it. And then I was there, and they needed someone to run the technology transfer office, and I took it on. I took on the challenge.
Amazing.
Okay.
And that's not to do with your training in intellectual prop. That's something.
No,
That's something else.
no, it's something else. I'm amazed at the trust they had in me.
Amazing.
Okay, I'm really thankful to the hospital managers. There was amazing trust that they gave me to start running clinical trials, technology transfer.
When we were talking earlier, I was saying that I get the impression that you're just an entrepreneur, like that is kind of part of you. And I don't know you very well, but that was kind of my impression as someone who interviews tons of entrepreneurs. And I really feel like one of the things that you're highlighting is like this curiosity. And I think it's really clear through that, like you're describing this career trajectory that is not at all straightforward for like a health tech startup CEO, right? Like intellectual property, management at the hospital. Remind me the next step after that.
After the hospital, I started a startup in digital health.
So right on to there we go. Now it's the entrepreneurship track that we're
That was from the clinical trials expertise. It was a startup that validated AI models in radiology. Offered, to bridge a gap that we know from the hospital that exists between companies that are developing AI models and the hospitals that don't know, access to technology, etc.
It's like this cool combo of multiple things because my judgment, you're this entrepreneur who's like out there. That's like this kind of part of your curiosity, but you're also becoming very, very familiar with this domain. And when do you decide women's health is the domain that you're going to drill down into, and that's what you're going to do?
So just a little bit after I left Rambam, okay? And I looked and I said, I have a lot of knowledge. I really do have a lot of knowledge. I know clinical trials. I know technology transfer. I know intellectual property. I know regulation. I know reimbursement. I know things about business. I have a lot of knowledge.
And that's because of this like variety of things that you did. You suddenly know, like, I feel like if we use a metaphor of you're running a restaurant, you're like, I know how to be a line cook and also a waitress and also run the books. And also, you're like, I did all those things in my previous roles. Like and then you can like bring it all to this one thing.
Bring it all. And there are huge gaps in women's health. It's amazing. It's unthinkable. The gaps that are today existing in women's health. Everywhere we look, there are differences between men and women.
So you have all this knowledge and you realize you can make a difference in women's health. When does endometriosis become the thing you're focused on?
So at first, I wanted to build a VC that would invest in women health technologies. That's what I wanted to do.
I will invest in your VC if you build it. And if I ever have money to invest in a VC, I love that idea so much.
Okay, that's what I wanted to do. And I'm a learner.
I'll just insert again and say that we know that most of VC funds do not get to women founders and don't get to startups focused on women's issues. Like we know there's a huge imbalance there.
So we were told that women's health is a niche.
Okay.
Niche, 50% of the population.
Ooh.
We're not a niche.
Yeah.
We're not a niche, okay? But I think that because historically, and things are changing, but historically most VCs were men, okay? And a lot of women's issues they don't relate to them. It's easier to relate to invest in something that you can relate to.
Definitely.
Okay? So if you don't understand it, if you don't relate, if you're embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Absolutely.
That's, you want to be able to brag about what you're investing in because you're doing something well. But if you're embarrassed by it because you don't really understand it and it's like words maybe that are a bit embarrassing to talk about, then maybe you don't want to invest in it, right? So more women investors are critical. I told you the committee that I chair, National Committee for Promoting Women in Science. Mm. My belief is, a lot of the gaps that we are seeing, it's not because, nobody wanted to research women, okay? It's a matter of awareness.
Yeah.
We have more women. Women care about what women care about, okay? If we had a majority of women, maybe men issues would not have been researched as much.
Yeah.
But historically, we had a majority of men. They research what they care about. They research women's issues as well, right? It's not that they didn't research anything about women. But the more women we have present, the more issues that women care about are being researched, are being invented, are being promoted. So we need women.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to start a women's health VC, and then how do we like make that
Okay.
sharp right turn into
Into
being the CEO of a
endometriosis.
startup?
So learning, okay, I'm a learner. I told you I'm a learner. I started learning and learning and learning. And endometriosis came up as such a huge gap, and in a way, a gap that I was personally a little bit ashamed of.
Really?
Because as a woman, I didn't realize how many women suffer from endometriosis.
And let's stop and get an explanation of what endometriosis is.
Okay, so endometriosis is when cells that are very similar to those lining the uterus grow and form lesions outside the uterus. Most of them are in the area which is called peritoneum, which is the area around the stomach. I would say it's outside the stomach. It's outside. It's between the different areas that we have in the pelvis. And it's in other places in the body as well. And these cells react to the hormonal cycle.
Okay.
So when there is a surge in estrogen, they fill with blood, like they would in the
Oh, like
uterus.
your uterus does.
Like exactly.
Okay.
So they fill with blood, but if they do it outside the uterus, that causes a whole cascade of inflammation and other things that happen, causing terrible pain, causing adhesions, causing tons of symptoms that women suffer from, including pain in their legs.
Wow.
The things that women suffer and they don't even know that they are connected to endometriosis are crazy.
I read a book about, I think I mentioned already, I read this book about endometriosis, and it's really just kind of a personal story of a woman's journey through it. And it changed my entire perspective on period pain, on endometriosis in general. I think the same way that any story about debilitating, chronic debilitating pain would. It truly, I think, I hope that most of us can't really imagine living with that, but having that little window into this woman's experience was kind of mind-boggling just how much it impacts people and just how horrible it really is. It's like a disease that I think I'm terrified of, like after reading this experience, just chronic cyclical pain.
It's chronic cyclical pain. You know it's going to come back. It has different appearances throughout the month. So it's not just this few days that you have your period. It's before, it's during, it's after. There are a
Wow.
few days that are clear of everything, and it's get worse with time.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of the symptoms, many women don't even know how to connect. Today, there's a delay of 7 to 11 years in diagnosis.
7 to 11 years in diagnosis.
Now there's more awareness, so I hope the timelines will get a lot shorter. But so you were in pain.
Yeah. I feel
We
like
all went through it. We are all women. We know what what are you crying about so much?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And no, it's not a regular period pain. It's not a little bit of cramps that you can carry on and work with. This is something that is really, it's really serious. It's terrible pain. It's ongoing. It affects all sorts of other organs in the body, and it gets worse and worse and worse. It affects life completely.
Wow.
And a lot of the women that suffer from endometriosis don't talk about it because they don't want to be weak. I can't handle pain. So they just try and suffer through it.
Yeah. I think about this. I think about this all the time. I think I used to think about it more. But this idea of like, I'm in pain, but I have a regular schedule and a work day and I have to go to it. And there's no kind of understanding or acceptance that if you're in pain, you can take a break, because it is something that's going to happen once a month. It is something that's going to be recurring. And society is not at all like prepared to handle that kind of situation.
I think it's both. It's society and the women. Okay. Yeah. It's the same. My daughter, now that after we got, I brought in the word endometriosis to our house, right? It didn't exist there before. And my daughter has period pains. And the first time she said, "Oh, I have period pain, I can't go to school," my first reaction was, "Of course you're going to school. Who cares about your period pain? Go to school." I'm really ashamed about this. And it was my husband that was more looked at the pain in a more serious, what exactly are you going through? And and we saw that this wasn't a regular pain. We saw that it wasn't something that I went through, right? I don't have endometriosis, so I can't talk from personal experience. And we could see that it was something that it was not something that would be normal. We know our girl. We know that she's not, not every little thing. She's like, the prejudices we have against women in pain. We knew it. None of them were true about my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And because we started talking about endometriosis, she got diagnosed with endometriosis.
Wow.
Now, when we talked to her teacher about missing school because of endometriosis, then her first reaction of her teacher was, a period is not something that you don't miss school about.
Wow.
We all know about it. Say, that's fine. I really can't complain because my first reaction was the same, right?
Yeah.
That, period pain is not something you should miss school for, okay? It was something like, sort of so difficult to even start a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't mean anything bad, right? So it was education for everyone. It was education for me, education for my daughter, for our family, education for the teacher also. Right? That this is something else, and learning to live with it, learning to manage it, learning to find what works to alleviate pain. Okay, and it's work. It's a process of learning, and it's not simple. And for young women, there's actually no solution.
So,
and for older women, there is also no solution.
Really? Wait, yeah, let's go into this. So someone is diagnosed with endometriosis. What can they do? What does their doctor tell them to do?
So the first thing they say is take painkillers. Mostly
Just like regular painkillers.
Painkiller, mostly anti-inflammatory, because there is inflammation. Take anti-inflammatory painkillers. And if that works for you, good. It works for some women. It depends on different levels of endometriosis. For some women, it works. The next level is contraceptives. Regular contraceptives. There are different types of contraceptives, so it's finding the right contraceptive that decreases the activity that causes the inflammation. What's interesting about contraceptive is that what we know today is that it doesn't stop the inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
and the disease continues to progress, but it's not as painful as long as they are on the contraceptives.
But they're still getting more adhesions, more of the side effects of the disease.
Exactly. So it's a solution, but it's not a very good solution. And for more than 30% of women with endometriosis, no contraceptives work either.
Wow.
Okay, and then they try and find other things, and it's a trial and error, trying to find a solution, and they feel like they're crazy, right? Because this doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and they have a lot of symptoms, and sometimes the doctors say, well, that's not connected, that's not connected, that's not connected. I was an ethics give ethical advice to an endometriosis research that followed women and asked, what are your symptoms?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was, we have 33 women in Israel, all of them diagnosed with endometriosis. And this was like following their daily symptoms. What are you suffering from today? Okay. And one of the doctors that was involved in this said about one of the symptoms, that's not connected. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's sciatic pain. It's pain of a muscle that goes to the leg. This is not connected to endometriosis, right? And we said, it's connected. Look at the data. It's connected. And she said, no way. And then she went back to her data, okay, in Kupat Cholim. She went back to the data, did a proper research, and she said, came back and she said, you're right. It's connected.
But because you're saying it could just be like lesions anywhere in your body. Like most of them are in the stomach area,
Yeah.
but it can do so many different
But
things.
it's the middle. It can do a lot of things, and it's the middle of your body, and it has a lot of. It's a cascade. This affects this, affect.
Wow.
Okay, and there's a lot of symptoms. The average woman in the study had 33 symptoms.
33 different symptoms.
One woman average.
Oh my goodness.
33 symptoms.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling.
That sounds exhausting. I'm tired. Just like, oh, wow. Okay, so EndoSpot. Let's talk about this new idea for a new solution. What does it do?
Okay, so we said, this is unacceptable completely, and we feel ashamed as women that we are not aware of the suffering of the women around us. And as I told you, I started saying endometriosis. My daughter was diagnosed. Women around me, when I started saying, I said, I actually have diagnosis, the endometriosis. It took them 10 years to diagnose me, 11 years to diagnose me,
Wow.
15 years to diagnose me. Nobody would believe me. You don't know how many doctors I went through. And even today, the treatments for endometriosis, they induce menopause.
That's the treatment to induce menopause?
Yeah,
From
they
from
add back some hormonal therapy so that it won't be complete menopause. It's restricted in time because
yeah.
you can't suffer it, but there is no good treatment.
Also, we didn't touch on this, but there are also surgeries, right?
There are also
To
surgeries
like remove lesions.
to remove lesions. Some of them work, but they are at least 30% recurrence rate that they go
Wow.
back to surgery. It works, right? But it goes back, and
And
maybe
it's
they didn't.
invasive.
It's very invasive. It has its own side effects and complications. And they normally, maybe they don't find all the lesions. Maybe there's a different reason. Okay. And sometimes they take out areas that don't have lesions because they weren't
Mm,
sure. These are
wow.
really major surgeries. Okay. Um, so surgery is a route. Even the surgeons today are hesitant about when they go to surgery. They used to go to it more easily.
Mm.
Okay, oh, you have surgery. You have endometriosis. Let's do surgery. Today they are more hesitant about it. The surgeon I've been talking to are very responsible in saying, what are our needs here?
Mm.
How can we manage it? Before they go to surgery, and when it should go to surgery, to go to surgery. So that's a route with a high recurrence rate, a lot of complications. Another route is medications that silence the hormonal cycle completely. So there's no pain from the endometriosis, but we have other side effects that are terrible. Some of them may be irreversible, like bone absorption, because
Oh,
there's not
wow.
enough calcium because of so it's time restricted. You can't take it for more than, depends on the medication. Some of them are 6 months, some of them are 2 years. So that
I'm just like imagining getting a solution for this horrible pain, but it's 6 months and then you go back to having horrible pain. Okay, so let's go to the
okay.
positive things.
So
EndoSpot, where are we
we said
going?
we want to work in this field. What can we do? Okay. And one of the women I was talking to at that time, she went the path of developing a technology for diagnosis. Okay. And I recruited friends. Okay. So my first co-founder is Dr. Salit Saban. She's a biologist. And learning about the problem, she said, "Oh, this is a problem. I want to do something. I want to be able to bring something that would heal endometriosis, or at least be able to manage the disease." So she was the first one in, and with a lot of literature, research that we both did, we said, we know there are drugs that work on the lesions, but they can't be used because of their side effects. What if we brought these drugs only to the lesions,
I just understood that that's why it's EndoSpot, right? Because it's like on the spot
on the spot,
treatment
on
of endometriosis. Okay, I get it.
on the spot, on the lesions, just on them, just act on the lesions, and not do anything else. So that was a start. It wasn't enough, because how do we do what sort of drug delivery system will be a drug delivery system? What sort of drug delivery system do we want? How do we get there? That's our third co-founder is Dr. Doron Friedman. He's amazing, with a lot of experience and bringing drugs to market in drug delivery systems. And he brought this part into us and said, okay, we will do a sustained release of a formulation that we know that works. We understood what targets we want in the lesions. When we looked specifically at the peritoneum, we saw what enzymes we have only in the lesions, but nowhere else in the peritoneum. So if you brought something there, it would only act on the lesions.
Mm.
And if it stays there, it only acts on the lesions, then it won't have side effects. Our medical advisor, Dr. Vered Kleitman-Meir, she said, I have a suggestion of how we get there. So she brought another part into this, a known way that can be into this. So all of us together are part of formulating this new treatment that will bring the ability to give a treatment that is effective, that silences the treatment but doesn't have side effects,
That
and
silences the
inhibiting the activity of the inhibiting the activity, stopping the endometriosis inflammatory activity. Okay, so that's where we're aiming at. We're doing lab work now. We have a few things to prove before we can get to clinical trials and to the market. Our first question was to make sure that we are staying in the peritoneum and that it doesn't leak to other areas. So we've started working on it. First of all, we do have a sustained release formulation. We saw it in the lab, releasing for at least for 3 months. We put it into the first rats, right? So we can see that it does stay in the peritoneum. We started with a small amount of time so we can start learning. And now we are starting a new study for a longer period of time, implementing the things that we learned so that we learn more things about our formulation. So we know that it continues to release. We know that it stays where it needs to stay. And we did whatever we did with a lot of friends that helped us. We also received funding from the Israeli Innovation Authority. Okay, and we're planning to start a funding round.
oh, funding round.
Yes,
Exciting.
this is the time to join us.
Yeah. Tell me a bit what that's like as an entrepreneur going into a funding round. Is this your first funding round that you've been a part of, or?
So when I was in Rambam, that was fun. It was a different way of raising funds for a startup. Because I was part of the technology transfer office. I was head of the technology transfer office in Rambam. And we built a concept, a problem into something that someone would invest money into. So that's my initial experience in fundraising, is the companies that we started at Rambam. After Rambam, we fundraised. As I said, I was involved in this other startup, so we fundraised for that one. It was an experience. It was totally different to being the entrepreneur and not being
Absolutely.
the technology
Yeah.
transfer office, and you're investing in the physicians that are building this new technology. It was a different way to raise funding, and now this startup today. So there's a lot of learning from the different ways of fundraising. And I think it's the most exciting for me from everything that I've done, because when I feel that I'm doing something amazing, that the impact of what we are doing here will change the lives of so many women. I don't know if you said it, but endometriosis is affecting 10% of women.
10% of women.
10%
Wow.
of women. Okay, so we have 180 million women in the world
Wow.
suffering from endometriosis. The numbers for the US, it's 6.5 million women with endometriosis. But then I looked at the numbers again and I said, in diabetes, we have the same, about 10%, 11% with endometriosis, and with diabetes, and it's 20 million women and 40 million people in the United States with diabetes.
Wow.
Cut down the men, there's probably 20 million women with endometriosis in the United States alone, double that for Europe. We look at that's how we get to 180 million women. And they have infertility problems, and they do surgery. They go to surgery. They have autoimmune disease that gets sparked in later on. If we can stop that and give treatment that gives back women control over their lives, we will do something amazing here.
And really important preventative care.
And
yeah, absolutely.
that's what we're going to do.
Amazing. One thing I want to stop on for a second, that we didn't really touch on so much, is the fact that every person in your team brings such different experience and such varied experience. How does that mesh together? How do you make that work together?
So first of all, it's critical that every person brings in a different knowledge, different expertise. So we said I bring the clinical trials, technology transfer expertise. Salit Saban brings the biology. Doron Friedman brings the drug delivery system. We have Yaron Breitman, who has vast experience from strategic companies about managing multidisciplinary R&D teams.
Oh, so you really like have a person helping make that happen and make that
Exactly.
work together.
Okay,
Wow.
exactly. So we have Yaron, and so he brings a lot of business experience from a big company point of perspective, which is really crucial and it's very important, because when you build something, you have to think about the end in mind, right? You're thinking, but when we will succeed, when we are in the market, these are the things that we have to have ready, right?
Mm.
Okay, and we have to start thinking of them from day one so that we are ready for the market. Otherwise, we'll have to redo stuff and redo stuff and redo stuff. So Yaron brings with him a lot of experience from those point of views that are really important for us to consider on day one. So we have Yaron, we have Salit, we have Doron, we have Vered Kleitman-Meyer, who's our scientific advisor and medical advisor. So it's a multidisciplinary team, and we completely, constantly asking other people for help.
I actually, yeah, we talked about this and I forgot we wanted to talk about this more. I think that that's like it's crazy, right? Because why are people just willing to help, especially like, I think that that's such a character. I think that's such a characteristic of the Israeli tech and startup ecosystem. It's like people are willing to help each other. Can you talk about your experience with that?
So people are willing to help. People are excited to help. And I think, yeah, I don't know if it's only I think it's the Israeli ecosystem. I think it's also, we're not 21. All of us have experience and people that we know over the years. So we have people that we can talk to, that we already have some sort of relationship, and they're happy to help. And they're happy to say, okay, I know someone else. Maybe I don't know this, but I know someone who does. Okay, let's bring them in as well. So it's a cascade of people that that you can bring in, and everyone brings something. They're asking a question, and the question sends us to work on something that's important. They're adding information that we need to be aware of so that we can take care of it. And this constant discussion and brainstorming and the ability to bring different ideas and different knowledge into it is crucial and has helped us immensely, because we sort of shortcut it.
Yeah. No, I sometimes think that that's like the real secret to Israeli startups is just the cultural aspect of like people just want to help each other, and so you're crowdsourcing such a bigger group of people.
Definitely. I think so. I think so. I think without the support of the people that helped us along the way and said, "Oh, this is interesting. Did you think about, these people? They know so and so this part. I've got this question. Did you check? These are the things that build us and help us grow. And absolutely, we would have made more mistakes if people wouldn't have helped us. And understanding things that we need to ask and not redo because we haven't asked the right questions. And every person has their point of view, and every person has a different piece of knowledge. And all of it is what makes things work, right? In the end, we need a product that will address a need for many stakeholders,
Yeah.
right? And all the stakeholders need to be aligned for it to work. And so every piece of awareness and every piece of knowledge and every piece of is what makes the ability to build. It's something that would be taken up by the stakeholders that say, yes, we need it, we want it, we'll pay for it, it will get to patients. Okay, so definitely. And I think the Israeli ecosystem in general is very helpful. There are also a lot of meetups that there's a lot of discussion and willingness to help.
Amazing.
personally, I was a mentor to other startups in the past, and I see that I called people that even I was a mentor for in the past, and I said, no, now I need your help. Okay, and say, oh, it's important that you do this and this and this because I made that mistake before. Don't do it.
Amazing.
Okay, so and people are happy to help, and I think I think it's I don't know any different, right? I live in this Israeli ecosystem. This is where I grew up in a sense, right? So for me, that's the way things work.
I love that. We're sadly out of time. Ronya, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much.